would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business tonight is to approve minutes of the September 26, 2011 non-public work session.
We approve the minutes of the September 26th non-public work session as written.
I'll second that motion.
All right, it's been moved by Charlie, seconded by Ray. All those in favor? Aye. Abstain?
I abstain.
Then moving on to the September 26, 2011 Select Board minutes.
Move we approve the September 26th Select Board minutes, regular meeting as written.
I'll second that motion.
It's been moved by Charlie and seconded by Ray. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Abstain again, because I was not here.
And finally, we have the October 3, 2011 non-public work session minutes.
Move we approve them as written. Second.
It's been moved by Charlie, seconded by Mike. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Those minutes are all approved. Announcements. The Select Board will meet on the following dates. Regular meetings at 6 p.m. on October 24, 2011 and November 14, 2011. Work review sessions prior to the regular meetings will start at 5 p.m. All of the above meetings will be held in the Town Hall unless otherwise posted. Weather observations for the month of September are available in the Town Hall. Plymouth trick-or-treating will take place on Monday, October 31st, 2011, from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. We still need a citizen to represent the town of Plymouth at the Genesis Behavioral Health Board of Directors meetings. And finally, we have a link for the Community Access Preservation Act, also known as the CAP Act, which is House Resolution 1746. This is a bill that impacts our local public access television, and the link, which is at www.votervoice.net, actually gives people the opportunity to express to our elected officials in Washington, D.C. how we feel about public access television and why it is important to protect it. We have nothing under agenda review, personnel appointments, updates, correspondence. We have a letter from Plymouth State University concerning Senate Bill 120, also known as happy hour legislation. And I will read this. It is addressed, dated September 2011. Dear members of the Plymouth Select Board, on behalf of Plymouth State University, I would like to share concerns over the state's SB 120 happy hour legislation and encourage the town of Plymouth to adopt a provision prohibiting exterior signs or signs in view of any public way promoting the sale of liquor or beverages at reduced prices as allowed by the legislation. Having worked with traditional-aged college students for many years, the issues of high-risk and underage drinking have dominated my professional life. Every year, PSU staff offer numerous programs, interventions, and learning opportunities that are designed to reduce the myriad number of social, personal, and economic problems that consumption of alcohol has created, including new initiatives that prevent problems before they occur. We have worked very hard to enforce all relevant laws and university regulations in order to hold our students appropriately accountable for behaviors that violate law or demonstrate risk of harm to self or others. We have learned from experience that colleges and universities cannot confront the problems associated with high-risk and underage drinking alone. We must have the active help and support of our host communities in order to create and maintain a healthy image and message to our students about the role of alcohol in their lives. Information about the implications of high-risk drinking will be easily drowned out if all students have to do is look out of their residence hall or apartment windows and see happy hour banners in front of bars, drink special ads in the campus newspaper or social media, excluding business websites, or flyers posted on campus advertising drink specials. To students, the term happy hour is heavily connected with drinking at a particular time of day just to drink. To them, this is an invitation to binge drink, as the cheap prices provide an economic incentive to participate, and the advertising promotes an image that going to happy hour is a positive lifestyle choice to be undertaken with the host of your peers. This misperception can influence personal choices to use alcohol and can lead to more high-risk drinking because everyone else seems to be doing it. Happy hour ads will also contribute to a public perception that life in Plymouth is focused on alcohol. First impressions are often those that last. Driving through downtown, you can easily spot the establishments that serve alcohol. Everyone knows where the bars are. But what neither our students nor visitors see are any public advertisements that promote consumption of alcohol through drink specials. The current environment gives a strong message to all community members that alcohol does not dominate lifestyle and choices and experiences. It is a healthy message that we hope to maintain in Plymouth. I am confident that we share the same goals and responsibilities. We are called upon to make decisions that take into consideration the needs of our individual constituents, what is best for our institutions, what serves the general good, what enhances the quality of life in our communities. I would respectfully ask that you adopt the opt-out provision for the town of Plymouth and, in doing so, set a standard for the rest of the cities and towns in New Hampshire in creating healthy communities. Sincerely, Tim Keefe, Dean of Students, Plymouth State University. And I think this is something that we would anticipate as an option that the voters will be asked to act on at town meeting in March. But in the meantime, I am assured by our code enforcement officer that the current laws and ordinances that we have on the books in Plymouth will assist us in keeping any happy hour advertising to a minimum. And does anyone else have comment on that?
Just a reflection on a report that was provided back in August. At the August Plymouth Regional Chamber of Commerce meeting, this matter did come before the board, and it was the consensus of those present at that meeting that the Chamber very much values its relationship with the university and its efforts to provide the type of environment that was spoken to in this correspondence. And the members of that board were of the mind that the Chamber should support any effort of the town to try to accomplish the initiatives that are spoken to in that correspondence. So Chamber's of the same mind.
That's great.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
What would we do exactly?
As far, well, I think what I was about to say to Ray is that the possibility to have a chamber member who is also a Plymouth resident perhaps do a warrant article, I'm trying to think of what the word is, petition warrant article suggesting this might even make a stronger statement than having it come from the select board, but it would be a warrant article.
And would it be in the form of an ordinance or an amendment to an existing ordinance? Do we know?
The legislation gives us the option of opting out of SB 120, so it would be, I don't know if it would be an ordinance so much as it would be a warrant article that would indicate that the majority of people in Plymouth believe that they want to opt out of the happy hour.
But it would be more than advisory in nature.
Right, it would be. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, do you, Mr. Keefe, do you happen to know how this would manifest itself in our town's documentation?
If our community voted to accept the opt-out provision, then the current laws would remain in effect, and we would not be then having to follow this House bill as it was rewritten. So it essentially gives you the opportunity to maintain the status quo or to move forward with the new legislation. So they've given the towns the decision to make that choice.
Would essentially not be operating under the provision of whatever statute this becomes, this SB 120.
Correct.
So, and is this in effect, is it in effect now?
Yes.
It has been passed, yes.
So I guess the question is, do we, who's going to is this something that would require a public hearing?
There would be, if we have a, whether it's a petition warrant article, there are public hearings on all of the petition warrant articles. That's a requirement.
I'll certainly bring the matter before the chamber.
Yeah,
The October meeting is this coming Friday.
great.
Okay,
I
good.
had a question about, is this something that would be necessary to go through a petition warrant article? It just seems to me that there would be tremendous support from the, if it were presented by the select board on the warrant article, that the town would, I suppose you do have a vocal business group that you'd have to deal with, but it seems like you're going to have to be dealt with. Does a regular article have to go to a hearing as well as a petition warrant article? If you just put it on the warrant?
It's an ordinance. The Board of Selectmen can do the warrant. It doesn't have to be petitioned.
It seems like kind of petition is almost like when it's a contrary idea that somebody wants on the board, but I think the town would support this.
Well, we absolutely would. My thinking was just that it might be a strong statement coming from the
Coming
chamber.
from the businesses within the town.
Coming from the businesses.
The Chamber of Commerce, coming from the businesses. To me, it seems like it would carry a stronger voice if it actually came from the businesses to go along with this because of their interest in maintaining the relationship with the university and their concerns around the health issues with the overconsumption of alcohol.
It just seems like,
It can go either way, Doug, so.
okay, it just seems like that might open up the door for it not to pass, because getting 25 businesses to sign could be a challenge, because there's going to be a number of businesses that oppose it, and they could lobby and could possibly defeat what the public would think.
Well, we can certainly take it to them and get back and see what, because otherwise it can come from the board. Yes, Charlie?
Is SB 120 in effect now?
Yes.
I think, you said that the building inspector said we're in good shape as far as,
He has provisions in the ordinance, even with this in effect, that he can restrict happy hour advertising, but he can't prevent it completely, which is what our opt-out would give us the authority to do.
it seems to me the board should probably support a warrant article, but it would be an ordinance, wouldn't it, Paul?
Yes.
Yes.
To opt out
Well,
of
actually,
SB 1.
No, it's not, nothing is going to change.
Right, it's
Just going to let us remain status quo.
right. It
It's
would
gonna
be,
going to be a statement saying that you're not going to use SB 120.
Right.
You're opting out of it.
opting out.
You're opting to stay with
The
what you have.
enforcement issue is the thing that concerns me, because we've had places in town that did this before SB 120, put special prices on.
Right, because right now, the current ordinance prohibits that, so,
We have this ordinance that we have now at that time, Joe.
All right.
Our code enforcement now has the tools needed to work with this, but SB 120 right now trumps our local ordinance.
If we opt out, does the liquor commission get involved?
no.
They seem to be the only enforcement group with bars in town.
If I may, what existing ordinances give Brian Murphy the ability to control that?
the ordinances that govern signage on the street, sidewalk advertising, outdoor advertising, restrictions on, you know, those signs that are authorized. There are limits on how long they can be posted for, that kind of thing. I don't have all the details of it, but it has to do with those limits. All right. Under Chairman's comments, first I'd like to just clarify, at our last meeting, we had the Historical Society here talking about the semi-sesquicentennial committee, and there was some confusion over it was a committee or a commission. The Warren article that passed at the March meeting 2 years ago actually the legislative body voted to establish a semi-quincentennial committee charged with responsibility of making recommendations for the 2013 of the 250th anniversary of the incorporation of the town of Plymouth. So it is a committee. And the other thing I'd just like to offer a little bit of information on is street lighting in the town of Plymouth. We've had a number of people who have informed the town hall of lights that are out on the streets in town, and we've gotten, I think, to all but one of those lights. But just for everyone's information, the street lighting in Plymouth is not all owned by the town of Plymouth. Some of it is owned by Plymouth State University, some of it is owned by the New Hampshire Electric Cooperative, some of it is owned by Park and Rec, and some of it was formerly owned by Main Street Plymouth, Inc., and is now been taken over by the town of Plymouth. And I guess what I'm getting at here is that we're happy to receive any reports of lights that are out at the town hall, but for us to get in touch with the responsible party to act on those lights, it might not happen the very next day. So that's just for clarification. Okay. We have no purchase orders tonight. Committee reports. Charlie?
I have nothing.
Ray?
One report that covers the 3 outcomes of the work session of the planning board this past Thursday. In the first instance, we received an update from the owners of the Mountain View Estates development. Some people know it as Blackie's. It's located on Fairgrounds Road, just off of Route 3. And as everyone is somewhat familiar, the economies of developments are slow, and this project was initially approved in 2005. And the language was such that in the development agreements with the planning board that were executed initially indicated that substantial development had to begin within the whole project within 7 years. We spent a fair amount of time clarifying, or trying to clarify what that looked like. There are various stages of that development that were authorized about a year later with the planning board. And the first phase, which has the 2 houses that are in place out there now, has got all the necessary road development in place. And we're going to seek the advice of our town attorney as to whether or not the language of that subsequent amendment that was approved in 2006 and the work that's already been accomplished within the development meets the requirements of substantial development. The feeling or the consensus of the members of the planning board that were present this past Thursday night was that if the answer turns out to be no, then we would certainly, at the planning board, would certainly willingly entertain an extension to allow that project to have a further out date before substantial development. So we think we've come to an answer one way or the other to that. We also had the point brought up after the recent Hurricane Irene coming through. There tends to be, I'll use the word confusion, that has arisen as to what the requirements are or should be for addressing floodplain issues along Tenny Mountain Highway. If you look at the standard that was imposed on the proposed Lowe's development back in the middle part of this past decade, the substantial development that was being proposed on that site required that there be full mitigation, not only for the floodway, but for the floodplain, to make sure that there was no impact on either of those parts of that parcel. What has occurred on this other side of Tenny Mountain Highway, typically called the south side, over the last few years is there's been piecemeal development that has occurred, first with the credit union and most recently with CVS drugstore. And in those instances, the planning board tended to waive the requirement for mitigation, even though both of those developments were within the flood plain of the Baker River. The sense of the planning board was that we really needed to come to a better understanding of what the implications are, because as we continue to approve piecemeal development of this lot and then the next lot and then the next lot, what's the aggregate impact that could be occurring on the flow of the Baker River, on the properties both downstream and upstream. So the planning board is going to look to and put together a committee to further investigate that so they can add some clarity to what we should be doing in the future. And the third issue was the resolution that came from our fire chief. You may recall that we reported last time that we had a review of the Martin Estates property in the southern part of the town, a 9-lot subdivision, about whether or not a cistern should be required, and we left it for the town planner to communicate with the fire chief to find out if the current fire chief believed that that was something that was necessary. We got a very good report back from the fire chief indicating that his research indicated that there were sufficient natural resources available within the area that a cistern would not be required.
Just one last item on that was sort of an update, well, not sort of, an update. I think a very productive summary from Mike Vignali, the town's consulting engineer, on the Page Street issue, kind of relative to the linkage between the Blackie project and Plymouth Woods? Plymouth Woods. And that was sort of brought to the board in anticipation of the November 3rd sort of informational meeting that the planning board's going to hold.
Well, I attended the most recent Plymouth Energy Commission meeting, and the interesting element of that to me was that someone, and I wish I could credit him or them, but members of the Energy Commission have inventoried, this hasn't been discussed here, I don't think, has it? Inventoried all of the street lighting in town. I think they've identified who owns it, how much it costs, how many watts each light is, and all of that sort of thing. And I think at some point in the not-too-distant future, they are going to recommend that certain of these lights either be turned off, or that some of the lighting at least be modified in some way to preserve some money and to make sure that we're lighting the areas that need to be lit and not lighting the areas that don't need to be lit.
Okay. And I had no committee report, so we will move on to new business. The water bill for the common, Larry Gibson.
Good evening. I have an updated sheet on what is basically happening right now with the water fountain there on Common. This is just a brief history of what has happened. The first incident we had, we did get an abatement from the Water and Sewer Department, and I want to thank them for that. Waiting for that decision, there was a second leak that went unnoticed. We did repair the first leak. We did have a plumber come in. What is happening is it's the PVC piping that attaches to the water bubbler. If somebody shakes it or something like that, it just becomes loose, and that is what's happened the second time. It has been winterized today. We will meet with water and sewer area plumbers. The company that winterized the common today said that they would be interested in taking a look at it. They do look at historical sites and things like that and repairing it. Unfortunately, there's no way of knowing that there's a leak. One of my commissioners at one of our concerts setting up for the concession happened to hear water running, and that's how we discovered that we had a second leak. To access to it, there's a manhole about 5 to 6 feet down. To reach the bubbler for the first, or to reach the first bubbler, you got to crawl. There's a crawl space. You got to go in there about 6 feet, and then to reach the second bubbler, it's about 20 feet. So you're very limited. My staff, when they go down into that hole, they have to crawl sideways and to get into that area. So you may want to look to see what we can do to. I don't know if there's any way of bringing the plumbing up closer. We just don't know. When there's a leak, it's by chance. The first time water and sewer went in and they were reading the meter and they happened to see all the water that was coming out. So I'm not sure what the solution is. As I said, now it is winterized. We do have time to evaluate the situation, see what the cost is going to be, see what our options are. Is it worth the repair once we find out what the cost is, or do we want to continue, do we want to not use the water fountains and just use the Boy Scout statue, have the water going to the Boy Scout statue? So those are decisions that we as a board, I guess, will have to make, and I will, come back obviously with prices and what we've come up with as far as a game plan to see that this doesn't happen again. In the meantime, I have sent the commissioners, water and sewer, another letter asking for another abatement. That letter went in today. I think you have a copy of that in front of you. I think the bill was $2,328.94. So it's quite a cost. So, as I said, I appreciate the Water Commission giving us the abatement on the first one. And unfortunately, we've had a second occurrence, so it's finding a solution. So I guess we'll have to wait to see what their decision is on the second bill. So.
Okay, yes.
You talked about the water and sewer department going in there and reading the meter. Is that meter in the manhole?
It used to be all the way down, and now they brought the meter up to where you still have to uncover the manhole, and right there's the meter. Before it used to be all the way down, and they used to have to climb down into the manhole to see it.
I mean, if I may, as far as the winterizing, and both the drinking fountain and the Boy Scout memorial, or whatever the proper term is, sorry, are both winterized.
That is correct.
Completely shut off.
That's correct.
In your discussions with the water and sewer department, have you talked to them about, are we able to bring this closer to...
I personally have not talked to them. My park foreman has briefly had conversations, but we will be approaching them again and asking them for solutions and, finding out what is the best way to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Unfortunately, if you have a break in the street or you have a break in the yard, puddles form, but here it doesn't. This continues to flow. And it's by chance, and that's what happened the first time when they went down and read the meter, and the second time we just happened to be there and we could hear water running, and sure enough, that's what it was. So.
I'm not sure this is something that is available within the water industry, but it occurs to me that perhaps it should be asked about is whether or not there could be some type of metering equipment that is installed that would provide some type of alarming.
Sure.
You know, in the electrical industry, that's a standard practice. Just wondered if there's something similar to that that would provide an alarm either to us or to the water company
Something
when they start having a great deal of flow occur.
That's a good point. That's something I can certainly ask them.
Worst you can get is a no.
That's right.
Sure.
I guess just one last, I mean, with the winterizing of both those, this, you know, sort of the water-dependent facilities, it seems like you could, if you could raise the pipes to, you know, a foot below grade, it doesn't make any difference that it's 4 feet, you know, below the frost line. It's going to get winterized anyway, so hopefully there'll be some solutions.
I hope so, yes.
Doug is trying.
I think I was actually going to say what Louis just said, but I think another possibility is if you sleeve it with PVC and then put flexible PEX tubing, if there were a leak anywhere along the way, it would show up that in the manhole. It seems like something that's seasonal, that's draining, only needs to be 6 inches or a foot down, and if there were a leak, then it would come to the surface. Catch-22 is if 3 feet down there's a leak,
Well, the problem is it's underneath a slab or slate, and it just, unfortunately, nothing's going to come up. It's all going to get out. So.
Well, we will look forward to hearing the next phase of this and what the recommendations and findings are.
Very good.
So, thank you very much, Larry. All right, next item, fire station generator, casino.
Good evening. Well, this is just to try to get a consensus of the board whether or not we should actually pursue this. What it is, the generator currently at the fire station met the needs back in 1968 and 69. Currently, we have a lot of stuff that runs off in 3-phase. There's a good section of the station that's not powered by the current generator. There's just, you can't get any more out of it. It's a very small generator. When we went and got some prices on doing some of the station upgrades, I went ahead and I asked Wenzel Electric, because I know he's done a lot of generator installs for fire stations, police stations, and stuff like that. And I asked him could you just give me a ballpark figure or an estimate of what it would cost so that we had a generator that would run everything within the building, 3-phase also, that during times of power outages, our meeting room is black. So if it's nighttime, guys are coming in there, they're entering a dark room, which, looking at that, that's not the safest thing in the world to have happen. The computer systems within the station are not run on the generator, so when we're trying to work emergency operations out of there with the last few storms that we have had, we've utilized laptops and whatnot to track all the stuff that's going on, because the computer systems are completely off. The refrigerator in the meeting room obviously doesn't work because it's in that whole circuit, and that's where our food and whatnot to provide services for the responders would actually run secondary generator and an extension cord and plug that in. But what is out there, I've been talking with Paul and Paul Hatch, and there is a grant through Homeland Security and Emergency Management that seems we do use the facility as Emergency Operations Center. There's a grant out there that's a 50-50 match. There's no end date to it. But what they'll do is, you know, once I fill this entire packet out, Paul Hatch will come up, we'll sit, you know, Paul and I and him will sit down, review it, make sure it's right, and then it'll go for approval. If it's approved, they will pay 50% of the entire installation cost. Currently, right now, we're, without the pad being poured, we've got an estimate of $42,800. Given the age of the station and what we're trying to do with it, I do know that anytime we seem to put any amount of money into that old building, we get questions as to why. The generator that he's proposed would not be at its limitations in this facility, so that no matter what happens, we stand a chance of being able to move it, or if that facility stays, then it, you know, we'd still be able to use it for all its functions. So what I'm looking for, before I put a lot of time and effort into this, and this is one thing that Paul had said, is that if you get the approval and then the board shoots it down, it's going to be extremely hard for you to go for another grant for the same people for the same thing, because we already went through the process. So I'm trying to get a consensus. If this is something the board would like me to continue to work on, to upgrade our generator capability at the station or wait.
And this is money that you've got available?
There is...
We've got money still?
Yeah, I did, we got that. We do have enough money because actually it would be right around, like I said, 50% of that. You're talking 21, 22,000 once you add the concrete pad in.
It seems to me that given that it could be used at a future facility if it's not needed anymore at 42 Highland Street, either way, it seems like a smart thing to be doing. For as long as you're at 42 Highland Street, it makes it into a... And I don't like the idea of having firefighters arriving at the station during a power failure with, a fire burning somewhere in town and trying to get into their gear in the dark. I think that's definitely bad.
Yeah, the meeting room is the dark one. The apparatus floor space is lit, but it's that initial going in.
Right.
Oh, right.
Just, the meeting room is dark because the existing generator just does not have enough.
Correct. Correct. It's a very small generator.
Yeah.
Designed just to support the radios when they had the dispatch center there. There was no overnight fire service back then. And currently we're going to get that generator moved out. There's a transfer switch that goes along with that, with the new generator that they would have to install and move in. So.
2 out of the last 3 storms, we have had power loss, and we've ended up at the police station. So this is also the emergency operation center, as you saw, during Hurricane Irene. And Casino has one for fire, and Steve has one for police. We've ended up twice having to all be at the police station, and there wasn't enough room there to operate out of. And so we've also looked for a generator for the town hall. I just don't... It applies to the town hall also. We just don't have the matching funds for the town hall.
Right.
And that grant is unlimited in time. As you're hearing on the news, the money pocket, I don't think
Isn't going to be there
it's going to be, FEMA is looking for money cuts coming. As soon as that happens, Homeland Security will be next in line.
The good thing is with this grant, we've talked about it, there's certain things that I've got to do for this grant package that he can use, like some aerial photos and whatnot. So while we're doing that up there, we're also going to be working on, getting some of the paperwork done so that when and if we get the funds for a generator down here, we can get that process and get that application in. One thing they did warn against is don't do any work towards this new generator until they have said yes, because once you start, put a shovel in the ground in anticipation, no, this grant is not designed to reimburse the town for anything, which is why we haven't done anything. We're just moving the old one over, and I wanted to, bring you guys up to speed and see what you thought about this.
Sounds good to me.
Thinking about your observation about the value of being able to utilize this in the future, for new facilities perhaps, I think it's important to just make sure it's spoken to, and that is when you're looking at the sizing of this, let's make sure that we ask the question, if we are somewhere else, and if we are making the capacity requirements for that somewhere else, let's make sure we purchase the generator today that satisfies not only today's needs, but the near future, because usually it's just an incremental amount of additional capacity that you need to put in the generator. So
I have spoken with Bill on that, because I said that is a concern of mine, and he said he was putting into the generator exactly what the co-op is sending us, and we're not maxing that out by any stretch, but that is we're looking into that also.
Yeah, I would suggest that we speak with our current engineer that we're talking to now on the proposal, just to ask the question, what if?
Yeah, my only concern would be that, it is large enough to handle future requirements. I don't see the 21 or 22,000 as a serious issue. Plus the fact, if we do go to a new facility somewhere else, this still may be needed at the 42 Highland, and if not, it can be picked up and moved to the other place.
Right.
Capacity is the only thing I'm concerned about. Make sure we get it big enough.
No, I will talk with the engineers then.
Do we need to vote on this, or just the consensus?
You can vote on that, so that
So what we're looking for is
Homeland Security is very particular on how we apply for these grants.
so a motion to authorize Chief Clogston to apply for the Homeland Security joint grant for the purpose of purchasing a new generator.
I would second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, go for it. Thank you. Next, we have Doug McLean, discussion of neighborhood signs.
Hello? Tell me there.
Either wherever it's easiest for you, Doug. This might be easier.
This would be a follow-up on the, that maybe signs at the entrance to some neighborhoods would be a good idea. I think the bottom line is that with 1,000 new students every year, they simply don't know where the campus ends and where private property starts, and that's not really their fault. There's no reason they necessarily would know. We've had plenty of our own tenants that are surprised when we tell them that there's private property around it. So this was developed in kind of a strange way because a year ago, last fall, we put up 60 signs, I think, around town that said, family lives here, please respect our property in your town. And we knew it would be a little bit controversial, but by and large, we got a lot of positive feedback and probably only a very small amount of negative feedback. We decided it would be unsightly to leave them up all winter. They'd start getting tipped over and taken, and so we decided right up front that they would only be up for a couple of months, and we did take them all down. And with the thought that they could be put back up again, and soon thereafter, there was some publicity, some coverage in the paper, and someone in Durham saw that, and they called, the Durham town offices called and said, could we use your artwork and try the same thing? And as I said, I think before, they said, yeah, even better, you can have our signs. It's like I'd had it. I didn't want to go through that. It was okay once, but the thought of doing it again was just kind of painful. So they sent someone up, drove all the way up here and picked up all the signs and even all the oak stakes, and very nice guy. And I called a few months later and asked how they were going, and he said, well, we actually offered them out to townspeople. And as soon as he said that, I know that doesn't work. It's too haphazard. You can't just hit people. And he said, but we've decided to put some permanent signs up. The town got in touch with some sign company in Portsmouth, I think this is, that designed these signs. It's in Portsmouth Sign Company, and they designed those signs, and they came up with 8, 9, 10, 11 neighborhoods. Sorry, that's all I have. Okay. They came up with 11 neighborhoods that they thought would cover the majority of, quote, neighborhoods in Durham. And this is what they look like in place. I asked them just the other day, and they just came, if he could send us. That's not a great picture there, but a few of them did come out well anyways. There's 3 different signs, and one of them is clear, that you can read what it says. So, and they all say, welcome to the, for instance, Meadow Road neighborhood, families live here, please respect all property in your town. And also, it's a place to put parking by permit only, which I think would probably apply in some of our neighborhoods, where there's parking, restricted parking. I think that kind of by definition, they either have to be a town effort or they're not going to work. But they have, in order to be on public right-of-ways or the devil strip there between the sidewalk and the road, it takes a real installation. Either we pound it in things or some cement put down. And I asked him for feedback on how they were received, and he's not a man of great words. He wrote like 2 sentences. He says, well, as we expected, some people are very enthusiastic and some people think we spent money we didn't need to. That's what it's called. I was told what the signs cost, and I forgot. And I called at 4:30 and they closed at 4. but they weren't real expensive. They might have been, actually, I don't know. I think maybe $70 a piece, or something like that. And my guess is 10 of these would do Plymouth, and anyways, I guess that's my thoughts. I think it would be a good idea in Plymouth.
Have you thought about where they would go?
Well, not really, but a little bit. In other words, the ones that jump out at you would be one probably going up Russell Street, and then one going up Pleasant Street, and certainly one on Merrill Street. There aren't a tremendous number of areas that they even could go in. You know, maybe one on High Street where that one-way issue came up, and maybe one on my street, Rogers Street. I mean, there's a few streets that I think would go a long way to it really is kind of astounding when you drive around at 1 in the morning. I heard, I don't know if any of you heard the fireworks that went off Saturday night. They were very impressive. They were, if you wanted a fireworks display, it was great. And the next morning, there was this box this big, those prepackaged laying. I thought it was kind of odd, actually. If the casino was still here, I'd ask them, because they were still right next to the fire station parking lot. What had gone off at 2:30 in the morning were still sitting there at 10 o'clock the next morning. I thought that was a little odd. I grabbed it, actually. It's sitting in my garage. But the point being that the number of students that are walking around at 2 or 1 in the morning that really don't know, they don't know. They come off campus, most of them. I don't think most people with an apartment off campus wander at 1 or 2, but the people from campus do. And I think if they had a polite reminder that you're into a neighborhood area, I think it would have a positive effect. And I would also be happy to volunteer happily to help offset the cost of buying the signs. I think if the town went to the expense of having them installed, that I would suspect we could get landlords that would pay for all the sign costs.
This is something we certainly would need feedback from our highway department and others involved with the police. Police and highway would certainly need to weigh in on this, and I also think it would be something that we would want addressed in a public hearing at some point. I don't think it's something that we would want to just plant without giving people an opportunity to weigh in on it. The signs are certainly attractive enough, but I'd like to get some input, and I'd also like to maybe have our police chief contact the police department in Durham and get the police perspective of what the effect is, and maybe Tim, perhaps you could contact the university and see if their equivalent to Sean Bogle has any feedback that they can provide on this, because I think it's something that it certainly impacts a lot of people, and as you said, the reaction to the yard signs was, some people were really enthusiastic and thought it was great, some people didn't.
Well, but I think it's fair to say that it was definitely supportive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
In other words, if it weren't supportive, then I wouldn't.
Right.
It would be a dumb idea, and the fact that Durham picked up on it without us suggesting it.
Right.
And they had, well, anyways, I think a follow-up would be that I even believe I heard that the Durham Landlord Association supported this effort. It's something they could do to look proactive.
Yeah. I don't...
What are we looking at, $1,000 to put these,
I would think less for the signs.
get them installed?
Well, I don't even know how signs go up. I mean, would the highway department do the work, or
Yes.
would...
Highway department does the work.
The concrete.
So it would be the cost of the signs, it would be the cost of the post to put the signs on, it would be the cost of any concrete that was necessary. But Peter, I'm sure, has in his budget, knows what doing something like this would cost, so he could give us a sum.
It's costing them more to sustain the High Street signs than
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea. I think you're going to find a lot of these disappear and end up in dorm rooms, but other than that...
Well, these are less likely to disappear, I think, than the yard signs were, which definitely did.
And only, as far as I know, only 3 or 4 of those disappeared out of 60.
Really?
Yeah.
That's good.
Just an observation, and kind of tags on to what Charlie said in the first case, is that I like the professionalism of what we're seeing here. These look like they're well thought out, well done, well installed, so that I believe that they'll tend to last. The other thing is, Mike, thinking about the the report that you gave about the Energy Commission, that as I reflect on their work, it occurs to me that you would want to make sure that these signs are placed in an area that does have appropriate lighting so that the student, when he's walking around in one or two, is more likely to be able to visualize them without a whole lot to do. And secondly, as I think through what you just said, I also wondered, Val, if it's not something that Mike should perhaps encourage the Energy Commission to communicate with the Safety Committee as a first contact point, because I'm not sure that the expertise within the Energy Commission to be able to make a favorable judgment about the safety aspects of lighting, whether they're here or there. So I'm just wondering if those two committees, commission committees shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, that's a real good point. I agree.
Also on this, too, they need to weigh in, and then you have your representation from PSU on that committee.
Yep.
I mean, just as a resident of the village area, I thought the individual signs you put up were great, and it made it be sheer coincidence, but I think they were helpful. I think people did take notice of them, and I think this is a great idea. So.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Could I collect 2 of the 4 packets? In other words, you're welcome to keep 2 of them, and then I just, let's see.
I think if Paul has his, I think that's, Paul has one, that's all we really need.
Okay. Would
Yeah, one more, Doug.
anybody else want one? Have you got all 3?
I have all three.
Maybe you can keep the second one.
This is good enough. Yeah. I've got everything.
Okay. That's the best. Okay. I'll put them on eBay then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have no other business or unfinished business. Is there any public comment this evening? Yes.
I just wanted to share, and I've forwarded this to you and to Paul already. New Futures did a little kind of interpretation on how towns go about dealing with SB 120. And essentially, there's a provision in SB 120 for towns to adopt temporary restrictions pending whatever their legislative body's decision-making process is. So it essentially says the governing body of a city or town may adopt temporary provision prohibiting exterior signs or signs in view of any public way promoting sale of liquor, beverages at reduced prices by an on-premises licensee. The temporary provision shall be enforceable in the same manner than the RSAs, but essentially it looks like there's, depending on your style of government, it was either until your city council or until your town meeting made a formal adoption. So that might be something you want to consider as a board.
And Brian knows thank you, Tim. Yeah, and I found that, Brian knows he has that wild card. Right now, we don't have anybody attempting to try to do this. So instead of him playing that wild card right now, we're just, it's a card that he can play at any time. If somebody wanted to push
And
the
he
issue.
can bring it to us, and we can just vote on it, and he'll have that.
Temporary restriction in place until we vote in March.
All right.
That would just address some of the questions on what is the authority.
Yeah,
Your
thank you.
other
And
folks.
I had not seen that email.
I just thought, I'll bet you there's something online. Sure enough, the iPad works, Ken.
Great.
And I really appreciate the comments of Ray from the chamber, and I won't mention names of organizations, but I also work with an organization in town that deals with trying to discourage underage drinking of every level of youth. And I certainly appreciate the comments about working with the university, but in reality, what we're also doing is protecting the youth of our town, who are, I think the last statistic I saw was it's something in the neighborhood of 100,000 alcohol ads that a young person sees by the time they turn 18. And I think we'd all agree, we don't need any more. So,
No?
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tim. All right. There being no further public comment, I would ask for a motion that we go into a non-public session in accordance with RSA 91-A:3, 2, A through C.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved by Charlie, seconded by Dick. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are in non-public.